Do you want to hear something that most leaders get wrong when it comes to crisis? You don't rise to the occasion. You're always going to fall to the level of your preparation. And in a crisis, whether you're on the battlefield, a fireground, behind the walls of a US embassy, or even in a corporate boardroom, you don't get time to warm up. You either respond with clarity or you react with confusion. Panic is dangerous, but hesitation, that's what gets people hurt. So how do the very best leaders consistently make clear, decisive moves in chaos without freezing and without rushing? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on what real crisis leadership looks like and how you build it before the crisis ever begins. Hi, and welcome to the Everyday Diplomat. I'm Michael Forras, a retired Marine Sergeant Major, former U.S. diplomat, and someone who spent the better part of 20 years leading high-performing teams through crisis, conflict, and constant change. From combat zones to embassy threats to live fire emergencies, one thing that I've learned is this. Crisis doesn't make you a great leader. It reveals the leader that you already are. Today, I'm going to show you how elite leaders think and act under pressure, and more importantly, how you can build those instincts in your team before the pressure ever hits. Crisis doesn't care about your resume. When pressure hits, when plans fall apart, your team doesn't look to your title. They look to your tone, your calm, your body language, your instinct. And here's what most people get wrong. Crisis doesn't create leadership. It's going to reveal the leadership that you've already practiced. It reveals your habits, your communication style, the amount of trust that you've built or haven't. Let me take you back to MSG school, the Marine Corps Embassy Security Guard School. That place was completely brutal. The standards were through the roof high, the margin for error almost non-existent. Every drill, every inspection, every simulated crisis was intense by design. And here's why. They weren't just testing if you could follow orders or stand post. They were forging a culture from the very beginning, one that would hold under extreme stress in isolated environments across dozens of embassies around the world. It wasn't just physical, it was cultural conditioning. We don't just practice procedures, we built unity. We earned trust through shared adversity. We learned how to make critical decisions with clarity and without emotion. I'll never forget how tight we were by the time we graduated. If one of us was assigned a project, we all contributed. No ego, no confusion. We knew that if we were to walk away from that table, we all knew what we had to do to contribute to that project. And when we came together, each piece of that pie, when they merged together, they fit more seamlessly than if one of us had done that project by ourselves. That didn't happen during a crisis. It happened in the grind that came before it. It happened in the sleepless nights, the impossible drills, the shared adversity that turned a random group of Marines into a unified crisis-ready team. Because that's what people miss. The crisis doesn't build your culture, it simply exposes it. And when the pressure hits, when the embassy comes under threat or the alarms start going off at 3 a.m., you don't have time to become a cohesive team. You either already are or you're already not. The best teams I've ever seen, they didn't wait for chaos to begin to get serious. They built the habits, the culture, and the muscle memory long before the fire ever started. That's what made them unstoppable when it really mattered. If you're stepping into a new leadership role or you've just been promoted, first of all, congratulations. And you already know the first 30 days can make or break you. Get it right, and you build trust, clarity, and control. But get it wrong, and you might spend months or even years trying to recover your credibility, if you ever recovered at all. That's why I went ahead and built the first 30 days, how new leaders earn respect and set the tone. This isn't fluff, it's not theory, it's the real world tactics that I use to walk into broken teams, establish control, and then earn trust from day one, even under pressure. This course equips you with the tools, habits, and mindset that you need to lead with confidence, to go from unsure and anxious to respected and in control without overcompensating or overstepping. And in honor of the launch, we're offering a special introductory price for the first 30 days. Go ahead and use the promo code that should be popping up on the screen right about there, and use it during checkout to receive your special launch pricing. If you're serious about making your mark and avoiding early mistakes that hold most leaders back, this course is your edge. Go ahead and head to everydaydiplomat.com to grab it now, or just click the link in the description below. You ever have a really good story that you know is the story to tell to drive a point home, but something's holding you back from telling it? It's usually embarrassment. That's the case right here. I have one. I'm going to tell it to you, and it is a little embarrassing, but this channel exists to pass on hard-won lessons so you don't have to learn the same way that I did. So here it is. Every single one of us have some preconceived notion of how we're going to react in a crisis or an emergency. We train a lot. And as a Marine, you think the first time that somebody pulls a gun on you, you're going to be what you see in the movies. You're going to react instinctively and perfectly every time. Well, I'm going to tell you this. The first time that somebody pulled a gun on me, I flinched. Instinctively, I threw my hands up in front of my face. And I don't recall saying this, but my friends all remind me that I said something like, not the face. Not exactly a proud moment of mine, but it was real. At that point in my life, I hadn't trained for that type of moment. I didn't have the muscle memory and I didn't have the calm. I just had the primitive instincts. And in high stress situations, instinct alone is never going to be enough. Here's why that matters. Most people assume that they're going to be brave when it counts, that they're going to rise to the occasion, that they're going to figure it out in the heat of the moment. But that's simply not how the human brain works in a crisis mode. When your body perceives danger, it bypasses all semblance of logic. You're not reasoning your way through the situation. You're simply reacting from the amygdala. That's the primitive part of the brain that's responsible for fight, flight, or even freeze response. That's why your fine motor skills completely degrade. Your heart rate spikes, your vision narrows, you lose access to your higher reasoning. Why does that happen? Because your body is doing what it was evolved to do more than 100,000 years ago. If something dangerous was coming at you in the wild, you didn't need to weigh the options at an academic level. You needed to act, and immediately. So your brain floods your system with adrenaline and cortisol. Your blood gets pulled away from your extremities and into your core muscles. Your field of vision locks onto a single threat. Complex decision-making, it shuts down because back then, thinking slowed you down. That's great when you're running away from a bear or a saber-toothed tiger, but when you're leading a team through a building evacuation or managing an emergency or making real-time calls under pressure, you need more than primitive instinct. You need trained instinct. Years later, after tens of thousands of rounds fired downrange, countless reps under pressure, and years of carrying a weapon as part of my daily duties, I was caught in the middle of an armed robbery. I was off duty and I was unarmed, but without thinking and without hesitation, my hand moved to draw a sidearm that wasn't even there. And here's the key. That motion had been drilled so deeply, so thoroughly into my brain after years of repetition that it had become completely automatic. Every single day I carried a sidearm and trained with it, and the motion of sliding my hand across my side to draw was no longer a thought, it was an ingrained reflex. Now, was that a perfect response in that exact situation? Maybe not, especially because I was unarmed, but it told me something powerful. I had closed the gap between flinching and acting. I didn't panic, I didn't freeze, I responded incredibly calmly, instinctively, and absolutely automatically. And that's what I want you to take away from this. You don't train to be fearless, you train to be functional when that fear shows up. The gap between hesitation and decisive action isn't filled with courage, it's filled with preparation, a lot of it. It's the reps, the drills, the visualization, the trust in yourself and your team that's built long before the pressure ever hits. Because when crisis strikes, you're not going to have time to decide who you want to be in that moment. You're going to default to whatever lives in your bones. Now, just because you're not in a full-blown crisis doesn't mean that your leadership presence doesn't matter. In fact, most of the trust that you build or destroy happens in the day-to-day moments, the meetings, the check-ins, those offhand comments that either strengthen your credibility or quietly erode it. That's why I put together a free guide for you. It's called 10 Things to Never Say as a Leader. These are phrases that I've heard in the wild, things that good leaders say with good intentions, but they backfire. They kill trust, they confuse your team, and they make you look unsure, insecure, or even out of touch without even realizing it. This guide is short, it's practical and immediately useful, and it's the type of thing that you can read in 5 minutes and start applying right now. And the very best part, it's completely free. And you can go ahead and grab it at everydaydiplomat.com, or you can find it in the link in the description below. One small shift in your language can change how your team sees you. Let's make sure it's in the right direction. The best crisis performers that I've ever seen, they weren't always the smartest or the toughest or even the most experienced. They were the ones who rehearsed when other people relaxed. They ran the drills, they walked the routes, they didn't wait for pressure to show up. They invited it early on their own terms. You could wake them up at 2 a.m. and tell them the embassy alarm was going off for this, that, or the other, and within seconds, they were dressed, equipped, and already thinking 3 steps ahead of you. Not because they were fearless, but because they trained that exact response so many times that it became ingrained in their brain and purely instinctual. That's the part that most teams miss. It's easy to talk about readiness. It's easy to write a plan and feel like you've checked that box. But writing the plan is not enough. Reading the plan is not enough. You have to test it. Cold. No reminders, no prep. Just hit the alarm and see what happens. If you're a leader, ask yourself, when was the last time that your team rehearsed something under stress? Do they know the first 3 actions to take if everything goes wrong? Have you ever simulated pressure, not just in theory, but in actual practice? Because if your people are only confident when everything is calm, they're not ready. In my teams, whether it was Marines, firefighters, or embassy staff, I built rehearsals into our rhythm. Fire drills weren't checks in the box or exercises. They were graded repetitions. Evacuation walkthroughs had actual role players. We created failure points on purpose so people would learn to adjust in real time. Not because I was paranoid, but because I was preparing them for when the real thing would come, because it always comes. That's what elite leadership is. It's not reacting, it's anticipating and then rehearsing until instinct begins to take over. Because when the fire starts, you don't need ideas, you need actions, reliable, practiced, and repeatable actions. And those do not come from theory, they only come from repetition. If the ideas in this episode are beginning to resonate with you, if you've ever been in the middle of a crisis and wish that you had just a little more clarity, control, or perhaps confidence, then I want to personally invite you to grab a copy of my book, The Everyday Diplomat. This book goes even deeper into the concepts we talked about on this channel, especially how to lead with influence and in high-stake, high-friction, and even high-pressure environments. It's not a theory book, it's not fluff. It's full of real-world stories, field-tested principles, and the exact leadership mindset that I've used in combat zones, embassy threats, and broken teams and crisis response units. If you want to become the kind of leader that people trust, even when everything's on the line, this is where you start sharpening that edge. You can grab the Everyday Diplomat on Amazon or through the link in the description below. Before we close out this episode, I want to go ahead and give you a special bonus. It's something that I normally only teach inside my exclusive Foundations course, but I feel like it's important to get this one out into the world. I call it the Guide Framework, and it's become one of the most important tools in my leadership toolkit. Now, none of this replaces the need for preparation. You should absolutely train your people, rehearse your plans, and build these systems before the fire ever starts. But sometimes the plan is going to break. And when it does, you need something more than just instinct. You need a process, a repeatable process that you can trust when the time is short and the clarity is fading. That's what the Guide Framework is for. GUIDE is an acronym, and it stands for Gather, Understand, Initiate, Deliver, and then Evaluate. Let me go ahead and break that down. Gather. Start by listening. I mean, really listening. Collect the critical information. What's happening? What do you know? What's missing? Understand. Once you've gathered, zoom out. What's the real root cause here? What context or dynamics are at play? And don't just treat the symptoms, diagnose what's actually driving them. Initiate. Now you act, but not alone. You build a clear, collaborative plan with your team, and one that's aligned, realistic, and understood by everyone involved. Next, we deliver. Execute. Stay focused, but flexible. Crisis situations are ever evolving, so your delivery needs to be able to flex in the moment. Don't just finish with excellence. And finally, we evaluate. And once it's done, pause, reflect. Ask what worked, what didn't work. What are you going to do differently next time? That's GUIDE in a nutshell. It's not a checklist, it's a compass. And once you've internalized it, you can use it even in the middle of a crisis because the rhythm is already there. We go much deeper into this inside the Foundations course, but I wanted to share it here because it's changed the way that I lead, especially when things begin to get messy. Let's go ahead and bring this all home. Crisis doesn't build your leadership, it simply reveals what you already have. It shows your habits, your culture, your clarity, your ability to stay human, calm, and in control when everything is on the line. And in those moments, you won't rise to the occasion. You're going to fall to your level of preparation, to your training, to your habits and your instinct. So build them now when the fire hasn't yet started, because that's when real leadership begins. If you've enjoyed this content and if it's helped you lead a little bit sharper and you feel like we've earned a like and subscribe, we'd love to have you join us. We release one high-impact episode every week, plus a few short videos in between to keep your edge sharp. Thanks for being here. And remember, leadership doesn't start when the crisis hits. It starts with how you prepare your people, your culture, and yourself long before it ever does.